Hi, I'm Dr. Sharon Grossman, and I've been doing therapy for a little bit over 15 years. I was trained in counseling, and basically what that means is we're looking more at a positive psychology spin on things, really about multiculturalism and things of that nature. And what I do in my work is I try to incorporate as many evidence-based practices as possible. And today we're going to talk about one of them, which is EMDR, and that is short for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So what you need to know about this treatment is that it is something that works very well with trauma. And when I talk about trauma, there are really two ways to think about it. We often think about trauma with a capital T, which is the kind of trauma that we think about when we are focused on veterans, people who have gone through something really serious, and they're having all kinds of symptoms as a result. But what's true is that we've all had some sort of trauma, and even people who aren't experiencing these kind of symptoms, we can say they're experiencing trauma with a lowercase t. And that might be a car accident that you've been in, or maybe an interaction that you had that left a scar inside of you. And so we know that we've had these kinds of experiences based on the triggers that we have in our lives. So you might notice that you're in a certain situation and you have a really strong reaction to something that is happening. Your reaction might be bigger than expected given the circumstance. And that is an indication that there's some sort of an emotional trigger. What EMDR does is it helps to eradicate some of these triggers by going to the root. So we're not looking at necessarily what behaviors you are exhibiting right now. Some of the other treatments may be looking at those kinds of things or about many of your thoughts or your feelings, but we're really looking at a belief that you have about yourself with regards to an event that happened to you. And that event very much ties into how you felt in that moment. And you might think about something that happened to you a long time ago, and notice that as you remember it, it is bringing up those same emotions, those same images. It's almost like you're re-experiencing it simply by bringing it up into your prefrontal cortex, right? In terms of bringing it out of that storage. So we're bringing it into working memory, and now it's getting activated. And that's why people don't really want to think about these things, and we try to kind of dissociate or to distract ourselves. What EMDR does is it brings the memory into working memory from our long-term memory storage, and then we process it in a very interesting way, which is less verbal than a lot of the other therapies out there. It's done through eye movements, and we don't exactly understand why this works, but evidence has shown that it is effective. By moving your eyes from side to side, what we're doing is we're stimulating the two sides of the brain. And through this movement and thinking about the thing that you don't necessarily want to relive in your body or in your mind, we're able to move away from those negative emotions or negative associations. And by the end of it, what people actually experience is that they can think about whether it was a car accident or any other event that left a scar inside of them. They can think about that same event and not feel like it is, really having an impact on them. It's almost like, yeah, this happened to me. Now, what it takes in order to get into this process is we have to do a little bit of history taking at the forefront. So when we start therapy, what you can expect is that we're going to ask you to write down a little bit about the 10 worst memories that you've had. This is a list that we can go down, and it gives us an indication of some things that we want to work on. Now, I'll ask you to write down what are those memories, as well as how old you were when each one of those took place. And on a scale of 0 to 10, when you think about them now, how distressing they are to you. So even though this is something that maybe happened 30 years ago, when you think about it now, it might still be like an 8 out of 10 distressing. And so our job is to take that memory and to process it, as I said, not so much verbally. So a lot of times people are a little bit anxious about talking about some of this stuff. It's really about just going into your mind, really just focusing on the thing that you typically would want to run away from. And when you do that and you're moving your eyes back and forth, something happens. Other things start to come up. It's almost like there's this movement from this thing that you were stuck in. A lot of times, if you're familiar with Peter Levine, who did a lot of work on trauma, he talks about the frozen state. So we have fight or flight, but we also have this frozen state that happens in trauma where we just don't know what to do and our body kind of just shuts down. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get you past this point. We're trying to get you to move, and as we're thinking about this, we're focusing on this memory, stuff starts to move. Like it's almost like people describe it as they're watching a movie, and you're going to the next frame, and at the end of the processing, it's almost like you're having this experience where you're seeing it from a distance. It feels like you're on the outside watching that movie, no longer in that movie. And so that allows people to feel a sense of relief and like it's no longer distressing them. So they can, in one session sometimes, go from a 10 out of 10 distress level all the way down to a 0. So in summary, what you need to know is that EMDR is something that is helpful for trauma, and those can be really severe traumas or even everyday occurrences that are distressing to you. And we know that they're distressing because you're having some triggers. So if you want to eliminate those triggers and you want to do so in a fashion that is less verbal and more mystical of the mind, using your body, really reframing some of your beliefs that are attached to those memories, and in a way that doesn't take very long typically, then EMDR is what you need to look for.